Good morning. Today is Monday, April 17. It's a new week. We are on part 20 of the miracles of Jesus Christ. Dear Diary, what a day this has been again so far. First, we went to Masada, then En-Gedi, to see the caves where David once hid from Saul. Now we're stopping for lunch at a place called Qumran. Qumran is best known as the place where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered not that long ago. It's located on the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea in the Judean desert. So we get a little tour of the Qumran Visitor Center. We have an audio presentation about the scrolls and the settlement before we're allowed to walk about. It was inhabited up till 68 BC. There's multi-level structures here. There's reservoirs, there's pottery kilns, there's houses that had been excavated in this area. And it was during the Hellenistic period that the Essenes, Jewish sect, lived here. They isolated themselves from big city life. They lived as a communal monastery-like community. The sect is thought to have eaten the communal meals. They studied sacred scripture for most of the night. They would take a daily ritual bath. They practiced celibacy, and they had their own calendar. It is thought that about 200 people once lived here in the height of it. In later periods of history, there were some Arab settlements that were here. Today, it is a tourist spot. Now, what's fun to listen to is the story of how these Dead Sea Scrolls were found. In 1947, a local Bedouin's son was tending sheep when one of his sheep fell deeply into a cave. They lowered themselves into the cave to get this poor scared sheep out, and they discovered a clay jar that contained 7 scrolls. These ancient scrolls were sold to antique dealers. Changing hands several times, they finally reached scholars who accurately evaluated the age and the value of the parchments. Further exploration uncovered a total of 972 texts, including the oldest known existing copy of the Old Testament. They are written in Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and Nabatean. The scrolls are believed to have belonged to the Essenes sect. Those are the Jewish people I was telling you about that lived in a community. Some of the scrolls describe all the different things that the sect did and their particular slant on Judaism. In all, there were 12 caves where scrolls and fragments of parchment were eventually found. It makes me wonder if there's other wonderful treasures to be found in this area. There are diggings everywhere. It's all in the desert. Everything is watered by an irrigation system that runs throughout the dry country because there's no water here otherwise. The sides of the mountain are clay rock formations, and they're dotted with openings dug into these mountains where people lived and stayed for shelter. Now, in the movie Ben-Hur, Charlton Heston, playing the part of Ben-Hur, follows someone that takes him to his mother and his sister. And his mother and his sister have developed leprosy, and they're hiding in these rocky cave formations. And they have to lower food down to get the food to these lepers. This is a really good visual of what Qumran looks like. It's a perfect place if you have to stay away from normal society. Think the COVID quarantine to the max. It's somewhere where a leper would have stayed. Jesus cleansed 10 lepers, found in Luke chapter 17, verses 11 to 19, and it reads this way. Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and they called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, Go, show yourselves to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and he thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked him, Didn't I heal 10 of you? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." The modern name for leprosy is Hansen's disease. What we traditionally think of when we think of a leper, it's a skin with a running sore, and it turns white. And eventually, if it's on your noses, your fingers, your toes, it eats away your skin. Leprosy was a term used more broadly to include any number of acute skin diseases, think psoriasis or eczema. Anything that involved irritation of the skin, scaling of the skin, redness of the skin, oozing of the skin. Now, this really gets to me because I've had eczema since I was an infant and got a shot that penicillin for I was sick, and they gave me a shot of penicillin, and I couldn't have been more than about 3 months old, and my entire body broke out in eczema, and I've had it ever since. When I was real little, my mother tells me that it was so bad on my hands and behind my ears, my elbows, my knees, that I would scratch myself bloody in my crib. And it got to the point where she would take gloves and she would tie them around my hands. And she said in the morning, as an infant, I was biting these things off with my gums. I didn't have any teeth yet. I was ripping them off because it was frantic to scratch my skin. It's incredibly itchy. I itch all the time. And so I can really and truly feel for these lepers because you look terrible. So to this day, sometimes my ears just bother me and I scratch them in my sleep, and I wake up in the morning and I'm stuck to my pillowcase. My hands have been really bad since COVID because of the constant washing. It's like poison ivy that never clears up. And I'm not saying this so anybody pities me, because God is good. My life is fantastic. But I can understand to a small level how these lepers felt. So, to that end, if I'd lived during the time of the ancients, I would have been one of those living on the fringe of society, constantly outcast because of a new skin outbreak. In Leviticus chapter 13, 1 to 46, it gives us a breakdown of how the ancient Jews handled leprosy of any kind. The priest would have to discern the condition. Then he would try to use various herbs and oils to heal. But if it was considered a leprosy, like an oozing eczema or a scaly psoriasis, or the actual leprosy where the skin was white, that person was declared unclean. So here we go with our COVID issue again. The person had to be quarantined for 7 days and then re-examined. And if the skin was clear, the person had 7 more days of quarantine before they were allowed to re-enter society, and they were pronounced clean. However, if the skin had not cleared up, then the quarantine was extended by another 7 days, and then they were re-examined. And if at that point the condition remained, the person was cast out of the community through no fault of their own. At any time, if the skin condition seemed to clear somewhat, the priest had to go outside of the community to check on the person. So I'm exhausted just explaining all this. Can you imagine what it was like to live with this? So let's get back to the 10 men in the story today. They were in an even worse scenario. They were flat out lepers with the oozy, gross sores. Their skin was peeling away off their faces. Some of them probably had a lack of digits on their toes and their fingers. The Jewish people didn't even like lepers, but they liked even less Samaritans that were lepers. So you've got a mixed group now. You've got some Jews, you've got some Samaritans, and the Jewish people considered the Samaritans half-breeds. And I apologize for the use of that word because it's a horrible word. But there isn't another word to make you understand how poorly the Samaritans were treated by the Jews. However, in the case of these lepers, they all had one common enemy, and that was leprosy. So they had banded together as a family of sorts. Whenever they walked anywhere, and they were always together, they had to call out constantly, "Leper, leper," so no one would get close to them. Today, when they see Jesus, they start to scream loudly, not leper, but Jesus, Master, have mercy, have pity on us. They may have been lepers, but they weren't living in a vacuum. They heard of this amazing teacher who was healing the most awful sicknesses, and this was the chance of a lifetime. I'm sure they hollered louder in that moment than they ever had their entire lives. Needless to say, living in these conditions, I'm not shocked that once Jesus healed them, most of them ran off immediately to show their families they were no longer outcasts. But the beauty of this story is that although all ran off in great joy, but without giving thanks nonetheless to the one who healed them, one did come back. And that one was a Samaritan. So let's go back to Qumran for a second. The Bedouin found his sheep after he climbed deeply into the cavern where it had fallen. And he was thankful that he found that sheep. And in the meantime, he found something else. He found the Dead Sea Scrolls, although I'm not sure he ever really knew what he had. But the Lord gave him that great treasure, and he gave it to the rest of the world, because in that moment, the entire world changed. The dynamics of how we read the Bible changed because we had that very first handwritten copy of the Old Testament. We can always find a reason to thank the Lord. 2 weeks ago, I had a series of neck injections in my back to help with compressed discs. And I've been thanking the Lord ever since, because they did work for me. They did work. But you know what? Those crazy injections not only helped me with my neck and my back and my shoulders, it cleared up my eczema. Now, the eczema is still there. I know it's still there. There's slight dry patches that I can feel, but I'm not scratching. It doesn't itch me. I'm not bleeding because I'm scratching my fingers raw. What a blessing. And I want to personally thank the Lord publicly today for that. God's mercies never end. They're found in a deep cave with a stuck sheep. They're found in each new day that the Lord brings us the sunshine. Great is God's faithfulness, and great should be our thanks. May the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine on you. And tomorrow, we continue. This time we're going to the Dead Sea. Now that was an experience I don't need to do again. Bye.